This is the 20th video in the Star Sampler series. Today you'll learn how to applique this star using freezer paper. I like this method for beginners because it helps keep your pattern's shape and it allows you to get some nice crisp points. Later on in this video you'll get a quick look at some other applique methods that you might be interested in using. To get started with your applique, you'll need to purchase a roll of this freezer paper. Now you can find this at most supermarkets next to the aluminum foil, or you can order it on Amazon. Just follow the link below. Now one side of this paper is shiny and the other side's not. You want to trace your pattern on the non-shiny side. Using a ruler will help keep these lines nice and sharp. You can use your own star pattern, or you can download a copy of this by clicking on the link below. Cut out the star and place the shiny side on the back of your star fabric. Use a hot, dry iron to press. Your star will stick to the back of the fabric, but it'll be easy to remove it when necessary. Don't worry if it comes up like that. You can re-iron this star a couple times to make it stick. Eyeball about 1/4 inch from the edge and cut out your star. You can see that this doesn't have to be perfect, but try to avoid cutting into that 1/4 inch seam. When I was clipping this, I went a little too far. So try not to make that mistake. You might find that the paper starts peeling away from the fabric. No worries, just take this over to the iron, give it a quick press, and you'll be back in business. To get this ready for applique, you'll need to use a washable glue stick. And you'll want to work over a scrap piece of paper, cardboard. I'll only be working a small section at a time. So first, I want to cut into this crevice here, all the way up to the paper. I want that cut to be perpendicular to this point here. So taking my glue, and I'm going to put glue, actually that's a lot of glue, on both the paper and the fabric. And I'll pick this up and very gently use my finger to turn that fabric over. I only want to work a small section at a time because you don't want that glue to dry before you get to it. So that's what you do on these sides here. So I'll take this, go back and forth, get glue on both the paper and the fabric. I'll push this back very gently with my finger. Now to do these ends, it's a little bit different. I like to cut just a little bit off, not a whole lot, but just a little bit. And let me show you first, before I put glue on, what I plan on doing. I'm going to pull this down like so, and then I'm going to fold this side in, and then I'll fold that side in. So let's put some glue on the end here. I'm going to turn this right on that tip, put it down like that, and now I'm going to take and glue this side a little. Hold that down. Now sometimes you might see that you're going to have too big of a piece over here, and so when I get to this point I might trim a little bit of that off. Not that much so, because you need to have something there to be able to push it back. So I'm going to take this and push that over like so. And let's look at that star tip. I can take that and manipulate that just a little if that glue is still wet to make it a little bit pointier. So let's go back, and I've got this little crevice here. I want to go straight in on that crevice all the way to the paper and stop. Put my glue down, and I'll work that down on the paper. And I'll continue in this manner till I have the whole piece glued down. The back of your star will look something like this. And on the front of the star, you'll have nice crisp points and clean crevices. Now the finished size of this applique piece will be 9 inches. So from your background fabric, you want to cut a square 9.5 inches. You'll notice that this square's a little bit larger. It's a 10-inch square. And the reason why it's a little bit larger is sometimes when I go to stitch around this star, depending on my stitches, some of this fabric gets sort of sucked up underneath this star. And instead of having 9.5 inches, my background piece shrinks up. So a lot of times I'll cut this background piece a little bit larger. And then after this has been sewn on, I'll trim it down to 9.5 inches. I also like to press my square into force. That way, I use those pressing lines sort of as registration marks, so I don't have to worry about erasing any pencil marks later. Now, to put this star on the background, you can put it on here haphazardly, or you can try to put this on like so. This point and this crevice fall on that line. I don't have to worry so much about this line here, but the star's kind of funny because if you were to measure from here to here and from here to here, you'll notice that there's a lot more space up on top. So you kind of have to eyeball this, where you think it looks good, where you think it looks best centered. And I think I'm going to leave it like that. I'll take my pins and pin this to the background. Now, I don't like to use a whole lot of pins because I usually stick myself with them, but it is a little bit more difficult if you pin the way I've got it here. It's probably better to pin along the edge like so. That'll make it easier to keep this in place when stitching. To get started stitching on your applique, you'll want to thread a needle with a single strand of thread, and then you'll want to put a knot on the end of that. Now I'm using this green thread, so you can see you'll want to use a thread that either matches the applique on top or matches the background. So I take my needle and I go behind the fabric. I come along the edge here, and I want to come up right next to the edge of that applique. As a matter of fact, I want to come up and take a little bite out of that fabric on the applique. So I'll come up, and then I'm going to go down right next to where I came up. So here's my first stitch, and I'll scoot over about a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. Let's see, I'm going to come up, take a little bite out of that applique fabric, and then go almost right back down in the place where I came up. So here's my second stitch. I'll move over about 1/8 of an inch, take a little bite out of that fabric, and then go down. And I know it's hard to see my stitches, and that's the whole reason why we do this, because you really don't want to see your stitches. So here's my last stitch. I'm going to come over about 1/8 of an inch, then take a little bite in that fabric, and then go back down. And I'll continue stitching this way until I get about 1/4 of an inch from this crevice. Here I am, about 1/4 of an inch away from that crevice. I'm going to go down, then come back up. I'll Take a little bite of that fabric. And now from here on in, there's not very much fabric back here. As a matter of fact, when we get here in this crevice, it's just a little string. And so to make sure that these stitches don't unravel, what I like to do is to make those stitches a little bit closer together. So instead of making them a 1/16 of an inch apart, I might put them right next to each other, going into that crevice and then coming out of the crevice. And right here, it's hard for you to see, but when I go into this spot, there's hardly any fabric on the other side of it because I cut that right up to that paper. And so this is where I really need to put some extra stitches in to make sure that it doesn't ravel there. I think I'll put one more. And then I'll move on. So as I come out of the crevice, I'm still going to put my stitches kind of close together, but not right on top of each other. Scoot over, put my stitch in, and now I'm going to show you another way of doing this. Sometimes you can scoot over like this, pick up a little bite of that fabric, go down right by where you came up, and then scoot over another 1/8 of an inch or so. Oops. And I'll continue stitching like this till I get to this point. Now I'm at the end here, and what I'd like to do is put a couple stitches in this point. So I've got one right there. I'll come in right on the point. I'll go down right in the same spot. The reason why I put a couple stitches here is actually, if this wasn't such a good point, when you're adding those stitches, you can make the point, you can use your thread to sort of extend that point and make it look sharper. But the other reason why I'd like to put more stitches in the point is because when you go to take the glue out, this is where most of the glue is, and so you might pull a little bit harder and rip that point. So if you've got a few extra stitches in there, that helps. So let's go down on this side. Oops. And there, I've pulled my needle off, but you can see my next stitch is going to go down there. So I've stitched this edging here. Let me turn this over and show you what it looks like on the inside. It should look like one continuous line when you're stitching. So let me rethread this needle and get back to work. When you finish stitching around the edges, turn your block over, take your scissors, and what I like to do is pull this fabric up to make sure that I don't cut through to the star. Make a little clip in there. And let's see, I eyeball about 1/4 of an inch seam all the way around the edges here. Don't worry that you're going to cut the front, because once you get in here, you can feel where that paper is, so you don't go all the way through. So let me finish getting this cut, and then I'll show you how to pull the paper out. So I've cut all the way around, and now I'm ready to go in to get the paper out. So the first thing I need to do is get the fabric off of the paper. So you can do that by pulling the fabric back And I can see that this is glue that I used is a really sticky glue, so it's a little bit trickier than what I'm used to. But you can see I've pulled some of that back, and now I'm going to pull this paper down. And once I start pulling that paper, often the glue will start releasing. And I can pull that. Every now and then you come across a piece that wants to stay stuck on. So you can come back and use water to get that off. Or, in some cases, you can just leave the paper there. So let's turn that over and look. You can see why I want a lot of stitches here, because there's really no fabric there. So you want to be careful when you're pulling the fabric out around that point. When I get up into these points, sometimes it's difficult to get that paper out, so I just leave it up in there. You really can't feel that paper, and when you wash this, that paper will start to fall apart. But as I said earlier, if you want to, you can wet this and then the paper will come out fairly easy. So all I have to do now is trim this down to 9.5 inches. And here's my completed star. Now this isn't the only way to applique a star. There's lots of different techniques that you can try. Probably one of the easiest techniques is just to cut out your star, place it on top of your fabric, and then stitch around the edges either by hand or by machine. Now this is called raw edge applique, and these edges will fray when you wash this, but that might be the style that you're looking for. You can also use a fusible product like this, iron it on the back of your fabric, cut out your star, remove the paper, and you have an iron-on patch. Lay out your star and then press in place. You can leave this as is if using it as a wall hanging, but if you're planning on washing this, you'll want to stitch around the edges just to make sure that it stays in place. If you'd like to find out about other applique methods, check out our applique series. You'll find a link below, or you can visit learnhowtoquilt.com and click on the Beginner Basics tab, and then scroll down to Applique. Once you learn how to applique, you'll be able to tackle just about any block. Thanks for visiting learnhowtoquilt.com. Hope you'll stay tuned for the next video in this series.